Welcome to the show tonight. I am Katie Phang, in for my friend Zerlina Maxwell. It has been over 5 weeks since Russia invaded Ukraine. And if you want to get a sense of the horror inflicted on civilians, look no further than the southeastern port city of Mariupol. The city has been under siege for weeks, with dwindling supplies of food and water for the tens of thousands of civilians that are still trapped there. On Friday, some residents were able to leave Mariupol, but yet another large-scale evacuation effort failed. Ukrainian officials say Russian forces blocked a convoy of 45 buses from leaving and also kept the International Red Cross from bringing in aid. Meanwhile, a senior defense official has confirmed to NBC News that 2 of Ukraine's military helicopters struck a fuel storage facility inside of Russia on Friday. It marks the first Ukrainian airstrike in Russia since the invasion began. Ukrainian officials also say that Russian troops have now left the shuttered Chernobyl nuclear facility after suffering radiation exposure there. The International Atomic Energy Association says it's looking into those reports. But Russian forces may soon be bolstered by hundreds of Syrian troops who are now on their way to Ukraine, according to the New York Times. And now Russia's faltering. Starting us off tonight with his knowledge and experience is retired Colonel Bernie. He's the former chief of staff for Marine Corps forces in Europe. Colonel, thank you for being here. Could you just lay out for us, just right at the start, how you think this war is going right now for both Ukraine and for Russia?
Well, Katie, it's going extraordinarily well for Ukraine.
What we're seeing on screen are horrific images, bombed out cities. And we know Russia is supposed to be reorganizing its forces in Ukraine, but not retreating. What does that tell you about what's happening with Russia's military progress at this point?
Well, it's stalled. They've lost momentum. They've lost initiative. That has gone over to the are going to have to dig in and get into defensive positions, which are actually going to make them easier targets for the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians are not going to let up on them. They're going to keep going after them.
Colonel, how much of a breakdown in logic and strategy is happening here with the fact that Putin rules with such an iron fist in his country? Do you think that there's some level of strategic independence that the Russian forces are able to implement in terms of strategy, in terms of how they plan and implement military attacks in Ukraine? It's such a huge amount of land for them to try to be taking over.
It is. It's a very large amount of land, virtually the size of Texas, as I think what some folks have described it at. But, you know, the Russian military has had a long history of centralized control from the very top. They don't have a decently performing junior officer corps. Their NCO corps is semi-professional at best. Their troops are conscripts, so they're not taught to go ahead and execute a tactical plan if you lose communications, as an example. Our Marines, and I'm sure the soldiers and sailors have proven it over the years, if their bosses, if we lost radio comms, I knew the Marines were going to be able to execute the plan. No problem. The Russians
stake some claim in sending a message that, you know what, you may be located in Russia, but we're still able to get to you.
Well, that is the message that I think will quietly be spread throughout the Ukrainian armed forces. But, you know, the actions.
For example, they want to take that more ambitious approach of rolling back the Russian campaign. What do the Ukrainian forces need more, Colonel, at this point to be able to affect that and make that happen?
Well, we need to continue to supply them with as much of these anti-tank and anti-ground Ukrainians, but they need the stuff. Let's facilitate that. Let's get it there.
Colonel Brendan Kearney, thank you so much for your insight and for being with us this evening.
Happy to participate. Thank you.
More on the Russian invasion in Ukraine. As we heard in our last segment, Ukrainian forces are having unexpected success in holding back the Russian campaign in some parts of the country. Agavan. He's a Washington Post correspondent at large and an MSNBC contributor. And as I just mentioned, he is actually there in Lviv. Sudasan, thank you so much for being here. I'm happy to see that you are safe, but just a little bit ago, you were over in Mushin. Lay out for us what's happening, though, right now around that area of Kyiv. We know that that was an ultimate target and objective for Russia. Clearly, it hasn't happened. What is your opinion at how the Ukrainians are being able to manage to push the Russians back at this point?
Well, several things have happened. The in terms of the Ukrainians themselves, what they've used is they've used guerrilla tactics to really push
the people that are remaining in the villages, these Ukrainian counteroffensive forces, or even just the defensive forces you've been talking about. Let's make sure people understand they don't have working electricity. They have limited to no supplies, some basic, just like food, for example. They don't even have cell phone service. How is it that they're able to organize themselves to be able to push back the way that they've been doing?
Well, look, in a village like Mushun, I mean, all the civilians fled. So there was maybe a handful of people left there.
At a time that we have left, Sudasan, can you kind of share with us what's the vibe, what's the energy, what's going on in Lviv? Do you feel safer that you're in Lviv now versus being a little bit farther east in Kyiv?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, it's completely different. Actually, life is quite normal here. There have been some attacks here, but very, very few. And so all the restaurants are open. I mean, there's still a curfew, I think it was 9 p.m., but still.
Raghavan, thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, all of us to speculate what his team knew. After all, what was in the box? When the Mueller report finally came out, it contained damning evidence, but it didn't have the impact that many hoped it would. In part because Trump and his allies were able to run out the clock. Robert Mueller said so himself when asked why Donald Trump didn't sit for an interview. Attorney General Merrick Garland has vowed that they will follow the facts wherever they lead, but it's still unclear if the people at the top will ever face accountability. So as we wait to see what will come out of these investigations, it's hard not to feel the same way that we did back in 2017. What's in the box? And will Trump and his allies be able to stonewall their way out of legal trouble again? Joining me now is Jill Wong. She is an MSNBC legal analyst and former assistant Watergate special prosecutor. Jill, always love to spend some time with you. You know, do you agree that the delay tactics that we saw in the deployed by Trump and his allies back with Mueller are similar to the ones that we're seeing that are happening right now with Garland and the DOJ?
It is, but there's a difference, which is the administration above Garland is different than the administration that was above Mueller. And so maybe it won't.
The integrity of an investigation remains sacrosanct and intact, right? I'm also a fan of the idea of allowing an investigation to run its course and to give a prosecutor as much leeway as he or she may need to be able to achieve the ultimate goal, which you and I both know is justice, right? Justice can be defined in different ways, but the problem I have is what you just noted, which I think people need to understand. There is so much evidence that is in the public now. There's that stuff that's going on behind closed doors to which we're not privy. So what can possibly be done to be able to hasten some type of conclusion to the investigation that's being done by Garland and his DOJ right now?
Well, I understand fully, based on my experience in Watergate, how long it takes to put a case together. But it's not as long as what is going on. I also know as a prosecutor for...
You were, as we all know, an assistant Watergate special prosecutor. You just mentioned it a second ago. When you learned about the missing 7 hours and 37 minutes in Donald Trump's call logs, you got flashbacks, right?
I definitely had flashbacks, and my phone started ringing. Creation of the facts will lead to a lot of evidence about how that 7-hour gap was created, whether it was deliberate by evading it using other phones, or whether someone actually deleted the White House records, both of which are bad and both of which violate the Presidential Records Act.
Merrick Garland was asked today at a presser if the Department of Justice would move forward with Mark Meadows' charging recommendation. As we know, there was that referral made. Let's listen to some of the sound from that press. Is it surprising to you, Jill, that the DOJ is still sitting on the Mark Meadows referral?
It is. And the reason that it's really important, the only thing that you could think of is that possibly they're seeing him as a substantive defendant. And so that's why they're not pursuing him as a contempt defendant. Rather than doing the contempt, they're waiting to indict him for something substantive.
Jill, I only have a few seconds left with you, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask. Tell us very quickly about today's Jill's pin.
Today's Jill's pin is a Ukrainian flag, and hope that they are prevailing in this fight.
Jill Wine-Banks, my friend, thank you for being with me. Coming up, a preview of what's shaping up to be a busy one for the confirmation process of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the United States Supreme Court. The Senate Judiciary Committee will 50 Democrats on board and Vice President Harris there as the tiebreaker. This thing looks like a done deal. But how many Republican votes might Judge Jackson be able to get? A few notable GOP senators have already come forward to announce how they're planning to vote. Let's not forget, though, Lindsey Graham was one of the only 3 Republican senators to vote in favor of Judge Jackson just last year when the Senate confirmed her to the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. So let's be clear here. Nothing has changed since then versus now when it comes to Judge Jackson's record. I would argue it's an intellectually dishonest position for that senator to take. On the flip side, Republican Senator Susan Collins, who also voted to confirm Judge Jackson to the appeals court last year, said this on Wednesday. Well, it is Senator Collins, so hopefully that opinion holds until next week. We had to vote next week to confirm Judge Jackson. It would be a resounding yes. We actually went to the same high school in Miami. We were on the same debate team, although she's just a little bit older than me. But even back then, Judge Jackson was known for her brilliance and for her kindness. She deserves to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States. She has more than earned that privilege. And this country, it deserves to finally see a black woman on the highest court in the land. Coming up, another day. If you thought the scandal surrounding Ginni Thomas couldn't get any worse, you were sorely mistaken. It now went fast. She's a contributing writer for The Atlantic. Molly, how was Ginni Thomas, this dripping with paranoia and insanity, Ginni Thomas, able to gain so much sway inside the Trump White House? Was it merely
to be that a lot of the stuff she's involved with, January 6th, has really sort of shined the spotlight on her, right? We know she went to the January 6th rally. We don't really know what other involvement she had, but certainly it's very dubious. And I think that's sort of thrown her into the spotlight. Also, you know, Thomas did vote against that.
Clarence Thomas himself, his own involvement vis-a-vis January 6th and some other stuff in terms of trying to prevent the transparency that we always need and deserve in the American public. After the revelations about the text she was sending to Mark Meadows about overturning the election came out, some cases involving January 6th. Is that enough? Recusal?
Majority. They only have 50 seats in the Senate, and they're holding the House by a little bit of a fraction. So they really don't have the numbers to impeach a Supreme Court justice. But I think they have to stand up for the norms, and obviously this is not anywhere near the normal judicial norms. So I think, yes, they should speak. And also politically, the calculus is good for them, too, because, like, people don't like this. They don't like feeling.
Molly, I'll send text messages. My husband doesn't read all my text messages. I'll go to some places. My husband doesn't always know where I'm going. But you got to admit, it's awfully hard to believe that Clarence Thomas had no clue about what his wife was doing during the Trump.
Or the January 6th committee can do with hearings and having people testify and even like have Ginni Thomas testify. Like she's not above the law. Like, just because she's married to a Supreme Court justice. I mean, if Republicans had this, if this was happening, if Democrats were doing this, Republicans would hold. I mean, remember Benghazi? They would have everyone and their sister testify on television in prime time. And they would be, I mean, the thing you really see is Democrats are so bad at this. Like, this is really scary stuff that could lead to the end of democracy. And Democrats are just really tentative and scared that it's going to somehow Republicans are going to try to get back at them. And they have to do what's right. I mean, democracy depends on it.
Well, any good investigation is, as we heard Merrick Garland say today, you chase down all the leads, you see where they go. I think Ginni Thomas is more than just a common denominator at this point. I think she does have to sit down with the January 6th committee. Molly John Fast, thank you again for being here this evening. Coming up, koalas are sadly now an endangered species. Who knows me knows that I am a lover of animals, which is why it pains me to say that one of the most recognizable and adorable animals in the world is now an endangered species. If you're watching us on MSNBC, thanks for joining us. You'll see me right back here on MSNBC at 7 a.m. every Saturday and Sunday starting next weekend.